So the issue is, nobody's going to live precisely this long. This is a mathematical construct. The relevant variable is that roughly 25% of the males, 65 years of age today, will have a 90th birthday. Females, it's 40%. The issue is that people today are sitting there and having to be saying, I want the money to run out about a week after I die. In my case, a week before. So the issue is not the average, but what you think you're going to do. This has profound implications for people whose only or largest asset is their home. Because what those people need is some way of staying accommodated, but figuring out how to live when they're, how to support themselves for everything else that goes around. So tremendous opportunities in the real estate industry to try and overcome the inertia of people saying, I love the house, I've stayed here forever, to work with them and say, maybe you like it, but it might make a good idea to sell and invest half the proceeds in some kind of managed fund. So not only can you be housed, but you can have all of the other things you want, the vacations, the food, security, transportation, all of that other stuff. So then what's going to happen in Calgary demographically? Well, population today in Calgary, 1.4 million. It's going to grow to about 2.1 million under trend. That's a slowing growth rate. It's slowing from its current 2.2% to about 1.2%. Look below the numbers though. When you see that's not bad that the growth rate's slowing like that. So that's likely what's to happen. Two reasons. Baby boomers will die. There are a lot of baby boomers. The large number of deaths will offset births and migration to some extent. Number two, Canada has worse demographics than Alberta does. Canada as a whole will see virtually no growth in their young population. So if Canada's population of young people is growing, you're going to increasingly have to pay more, find all sorts of ways of getting them. So Calgary's growth rate will slow, but it's 750,000 people. Let's not stress. If you have to stay up worrying tonight, keep going, Luongo. Don't worry about the future of Calgary. What's going to happen to it in terms of its age composition is much more important than the number of growth, the numerical growth. And of course, the dominant shape of Calgary's age profile will be this upward shift as that 1939 to 1959 bulge in births gets older with longer life expectancy. So we get out to 2036, aging will characterize it. And so we'll see that the biggest growth in terms of absolute and percentage growth is going to be in those older age groups as a resulting of the aging population, with migration and births broadening the base. This is a great demographic picture because it means you're going to have the people in your population to replace those who leave the labor force through retirement. In terms of percentage distribution, this is the percentage distribution of growth in the province of, in the Calgary region. Largest absolute numbers, largest percentage in the 65 plus population, but you're still getting 20% growth in the starter housing market. That's pretty good. Good balance. There are places in Canada where these numbers are negative and these numbers are positive, and they have huge challenges in those regions. And of course what will happen is the old people will leave too. So there's the issue. That's what's going to shape your housing market. So you say, which market should I focus on? Pick it. It's out there. Find out where your skills, your talents, your interests, where your work best are, and go after it, because it's out there. But you have to determine what you're going to do. In comparison, on exactly the same scale, there's Canada. Huge growth in this 65 and older population, but even with increased immigration, almost no growth in the younger population. So other parts of Canada are going to have different kinds of opportunities in their real estate market than you will have. So what are some of the issues then of the older population? A lot of it is good news. You've worked in these markets and seen the seniors. I want to raise some concerns, and I'm going to raise some concerns that I think are going to be of particular importance to realtors, both professionally and personally. When we look at some of the leading, we've had all sorts of conversations about seniors populations, will we be able to supply health care, et cetera, et cetera. Most of those lie outside of our industry. One that lies inside our industry are these issues of senior financial abuse, of a whole range of issues coming in from people, seniors signing listing agreements, accepting an offer, and their kids saying they didn't have capacity to do it, to seniors listing their houses because they're lonely. They're never going to accept the offer. They just want the traffic. They just want to see people. That happened next door to me. The guy who listed it actually used to ask the licensee to bring him cigarettes when she brought people by. So a whole range of issues. Caring for your vendor, also making sure you don't get caught in situations where the kids, the nephews, whoever is hovering around doesn't come after you and say you're professionally negligent because you induced people to accept a contract or something like that. This is something, as the baby boomers' very few children look at the tremendous asset value in their parents' house and their parents are aging, there is potential for enormous conflict from people selling houses they don't want to sell to parents, people not selling the houses that they do want to sell. Doesn't matter what you do, figure out a way to protect yourself from getting involved in this stuff. So it's it comes up from time to time. It's going to increase significantly in the future, and you don't want to be in this kind of situation because lawyers need money. So how do you do this? Industry can stand up and put out a standard little bulletin that you can give to vendors to make sure they understand their rights. You can have newsletters, you can have seniors advocates, a whole bunch of things you can do. In the back of your mind, though, always have to remember that first lesson in real estate law of contracts. It's, do the people have capacity? And now you have to ask yourself, how do you ensure your self-protection around the fact that other people may argue that they don't have capacity? Okay, so having said all that, now let's take a look at what people are doing. We've already talked a couple times about life cycles. Life cycles are things that change over with age. So something that you do young, Shakespeare's 7 stages of personhood, where people in 1961, high probability of having a kid when you're young and dropping off. Now, low probability peaking in 30 to 34. Two things about that. So behavior is strongly related to age, much behavior. That behavior changes over time. So when we look at what happens in markets, we have to anticipate not only that this is what old people do, we have to put down this is what old people used to do, this is what new old people are going to do. So let's take a look at housing. And remember that housing, people don't buy housing because they want housing. People buy housing because they've chosen to live in a particular way and they wrap housing around how they choose to live. So if we take a look at the life cycle of how people live, we're by and large children in 0 to 14, 99% of the kids live in families in that age group. 15 to 19 is 92%. And then at some point in your 20s you leave home and you go out and you become a parent, single parent perhaps, but a parent with children or part of a couple. So we look at this and it kind of describes life and we build this as a model, but let's take a look at the fact that there's tremendous diversity in this model. In particular, in the 20s and 30s, a significant number of people choose to live not in families. So these are the guys I rent my suites to. You don't want to be in anywhere near my suites on hockey night. Because these guys don't have a relationship. They don't have a relationship with the person they're living with. They don't have a relationship with another person. They don't have a relationship with anything but a Nintendo and a hockey stick. So for some period, and say, well, that's part of being young, but for many people, they don't go through that stage. But notice that there are people who live in non-family households throughout their lives. There's diversity in our housing markets, and what we have to appreciate is instead of taking this model of people going in a straight line through their lives, those are mazes that people go through. When you sit back and look at your life, you go, nobody told me there'd be that many U-turns, S-turns, on-ramps and off-ramps. So that's the general pattern. And then there are people living alone, and we in our minds think, well, seniors live alone, and there they are. A third of the people over the age of 75 in Calgary live alone. But again, there are people who live alone throughout their entire stage of life cycle, and they are viable participants in the housing market and be good vendors, purchasers, etc. And then finally, institutional and collective. And again, we have this image of, well, seniors are all in institutions, but actually only 30% of seniors in institutions. 70% of the seniors in Calgary are out there in the housing market. So we have to focus on that. Now notice that there are people in institutional and collective throughout the life cycle. Somebody has to go to jail. So about 1%, it's about 2% of the males down there are in some kind of institutional experience and relationship for some period of time. And say hi if you see them. This is what it looked like in 1996, and it looks pretty much the same, right? Yeah, a little bit of difference here and there. If we actually take a look at how people have changed how they live in Calgary over the last decade, it's profound. The difference between those two shows an 11% increase in the number of kids living in their parents' home. A phenomenal increase. That's the market I say you go after to say, you don't want your kids going into rental when they leave home. Let's work together to figure out how to get them into a new condo or into a little starter bungalow or something like that. And the parents are still working. They can get another mortgage on their house. Real opportunities in that segment. That's growing. A little bit of drop in couples and singles. Not a lot of change in people's behavior age 30 to 65, because that's kind of how we establish how we want to live. That's where it comes from. There's not a lot of change in there. But look what's happening at the end of the spectrum. Significant declines in the number of seniors living in institutional and collective, in the number living alone, in the number living in non-family, and phenomenal growth in the number of seniors living in couples. So when you look at that older population, you're not going into that older population with a narrative of living alone. Do you guys really want to retire to Invermere? Or do you want to go to Invermere for a few months of the year and have an apartment in Calgary? Because Invermere in the winter, it's fun if you ski, but what I've discovered is that most of my peers kind of go from the pre-ski to the après-ski, and you just don't really get excited about whatever that is you're supposed to do in the middle. So that's number one, real focus. And then look at the drop in institutional and collective, almost entirely picked up by living in couples, but also a growth in living alone. Now you say growth in living alone, what's happening there? Those are people who are now fit, active, healthy seniors who don't have to be institutionalized. So the narrative of the future is, yes, you may need to go into a care facility for the last period of your life, but what people are going to want to do is have a narrative of how they're going to live in couples as they age. So some opportunities there for real estate.